Good
Good
afternoon. Good
afternoon, sir.
afternoon.
Is it
Yes, madam.
clear?
Clear.
Voice,
Clear, madam. Yes,
audio,
clear.
video.
Dear participants, don't press on present now button. Preeti madam, don't present.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
Hello.
Is Upender, can you hear me?
Sir. Yes, sir. Good afternoon,
Okay,
sir.
good. Good afternoon, Upendra.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, madam, Rekha madam. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sir came. You can start now.
Okay, okay, sir.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Namaste.
afternoon.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Namaste. I Rekha Rani Sidduri, working as assistant professor in Mother Teresa College of Engineering and Technology, Peddapalli District, Telangana State, India. It gives an immense pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to all of you present in this one-day international webinar on how to target right journals in social sciences. On behalf of the management, principal, faculty, and entire student community of Mother Teresa College of Engineering and Technology. Mother Teresa College of Engineering and Technology, located at Peddapalli District, Telangana State, India, is the finest family of education, the place where the future techno graduates are designed, an institution that makes students' dream come true, and given the hope to students who want to achieve their own dreams. Our college, which enlightens our students from the past 20 years. Our college has well-planned campus, pollution-free environment with artistic buildings, well-furnished lecture halls, fully digitalized library with many national and international journals and number of different streams, well-equipped labs with internet facilities. Our college offers different courses such as BTech Triple CSE Mechanical ECE, MBA, MTech and Diploma. Department of MBA has a pack of highly qualified and well-experienced faculty members who are passionate to learn new technologies and conduct research on their own streams, such as finance, HR, and marketing. They not only provide an enthusiastic environment but also conduct seminars, international conferences, and workshops to make every student creative and make them to get ready for the industrial requirements. Now, I would like to invite the director of the webinar, HOD of MBA department, Dr. Upender sir, to share his insights regarding the webinar. Over to Upender sir.
Thank you, madam. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Rupendra, Director of the webinar. On behalf of Department of Business Management, Mother Teresa College of Engineering, Technology and Science, we are welcome to you a one-day international webinar on how to target right journals in social sciences. As a teacher and scholar, I can say that without research, we can't imagine the world. And both academic institutions and industries nowadays research is playing major. Whereas coming to our social sciences, there are a number of journals are there, both paid and non-paid journals are there. Which journals are suitable for our domain? Often we are confusing. This thought leads to conduct this webinar. That's why uh, I invited Vijay Bhaskar sir conduct one session on how to target right journals in social sciences. Thank you, sir. Kindly accepted our invitation, and thank you to all the participants who reached the webinar, faculty, students, management of Mother Teresa College and Technology. Thank you, Varanda. Thank you, madam. Yes.
Thank you, sir. That is an informative message. Sir, principal sir is there.
I think no, madam. You called 2-3 times. It's not available.
Now,
Sorry. No, not available. Yeah.
Now I request a very talented and hardworking personalities I had ever seen, Principal of Mother Teresa College of Engineering and Technology, Dr. T. Srinivas sir, to share his thoughts about the webinar.
Sir is not.
Principal
Sir is not yet come, madam. You carry.
Okay, sir. Now, I am glad to invite a true inspiration to every girl student, one of the icons of women empowerment, the guest of honor today, our dynamic director, Adavelli Nauta ma'am, to share her insights regarding the webinar. Ma'am is there, sir?
Madam will join later, madam.
Okay, sir. Sorry for the inconvenience to the participants. Ma'am and principal sir, director ma'am and principal sir will join you within short span of time while going while going the webinar. So we will continue with our webinar topic. Now I am super excited to have you here Excited about the presentation we will get to have today. We have an amazing speaker who will be sharing his knowledge with us. When I say amazing, I mean it. After the session, I hope you all pumped up and ready to conquer the world. He will share his learning techniques to help you go from good to unforgettable. It is my pleasure to introduce today our resource person, Professor Vijay Bhaskar Marishetty from School of Management Studies, Hyderabad Central University, who is going to talk about how to target right journals in social sciences. Professor Vijay Bhaskar completed his MBA in Sri Krishna Devaraya University, Anantapur, Masters by Research in RMIT University, PhD in Monash University, postdoc in Wharton School, University, Pennsylvania, and Indian School of Business. From 2018, he joined as a professor in Finance School of Management Studies, University of Hyderabad, one of the top universities around the globe. He worked at RMIT University, IIT Bangalore, and Monash University. He researched on Indian financial markets. Many people cited his articles. His papers published in top journals like ABCD and SSCI. He received several Best Paper Awards and Teaching and Research Awards. Currently, he focuses on emerging markets, corporate finance, financial regulation, and machine learning applications in finance. His research interests include emerging market finance, Indian markets, and regulation machine learning applications in finance, financial inclusion, and fintech. Over to Professor Vijay Bhaskar, sir.
Sir, Vijay sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind introduction. Thanks to Mother Teresa College, especially Upender for inviting me to give a talk today. So I'm Vijay, and so I'm currently working as a professor at the University of Hyderabad. So today's talk is mainly about a kind of suggestive talk on where to target, in terms of if you're doing research in social sciences, especially in the area of management or in the area of economics, finance, humanities, how to really go about in terms of targeting top journals. So my talk is based on some conventional wisdom that have come across based on my own experience as a researcher. I've been doing research for over 20 years now and have published, a few articles in some of these top journals, not the real top journals, not the top 3 in finance, but among the top 5, top 6 journals that have published, a few articles. So I have gone through, quite a bit of, a rigorous process and learning, a very rich learning on getting to these journals. I thought of sharing my knowledge. At the same time, I wanted to also bring your attention to several other researchers who have done exceedingly good work in these areas and have published in some of the top journals. And I think I want to borrow their wisdom too as part of this talk. So the objective of this talk is twofold. The first thing is I'll discuss from the top researchers' perspective in terms of what do they suggest young researchers, especially researchers in early stage of their career, in terms of aiming top journals. So I'll be focusing on a collective wisdom which was drawn by one of the great researchers from the US, and he has written a suggestive article. I'll discuss on that article a bit later now, where he was the editor of one of the top journals, and he shared his experience as an editor, a referee, and also a researcher on how you have to prepare yourself, how you have to make sure your journey towards a publication in the top journals is on the right direction. So I think I'll spend the first half on that. And on the second half, in between, I'll be sharing my own experience while I discuss all these things to vouch as one of the one of the researchers who can whether agree or disagree on what the editors say. And the second part is I'll take your questions if you have any, and I'll try to address them. So that would be my talk for today. Let me share my screen. We'll take it from there. 1 second, please hold on. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 minute. It's taking time. Can you see my screen? Yes or no?
No, sir. No, sir.
Yeah.
No, sir, no,
let
sir.
me try again. What? Oh, yeah. 1 second. Now it should be visible.
Not yet, sir. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's okay, sir.
Present.
Yes.
Yes. Okay now? Yeah. So I think Kwan Chai is economics professor. He acted as the editor of top journals. And I think he has very rich experience in publishing in these top journals. And not only publishing, he saw both sides, one the demand side and supply side. So he as an author himself, and as a referee and also an editor on the demand side. So he has seen on both sides, and I think we have to start with this presentation of Kwan Chai to understand, and it's a very, very informative presentation made by Kwan Chai recently. So the first thing what we have to understand, can you all see my screen?
No, sir, no.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Is it okay? Is it visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay, great. So I'm focusing on the highlighted text here. Can you please mute your microphones, please? There is some noise. May I request you to mute your microphones? Yeah, thank you. So you look at Kwan Chai's take on how to publish in the top journals. So first we have to accept the ground facts before we start looking into the tips or suggestions made by Kwan Chai. So Kwan Chai, as an editor, he has got real experience, and he says that only 1/3 or less receive mildly favorable reports when you submit a paper to a top journal. In other words, most of the papers that are submitted to the top journals do not receive even a favorable recommendation. Forget about acceptance or revise and resubmits. Majority of the papers when are submitted to these top journals, they do not receive any favorable reports. Only just 1/3 or less receive that to mildly favorable reports. Not really favorable reports, but mildly favorable reports. So, it's very difficult to publish. That's what he meant to say. He's signaling that you don't get disappointed if your paper gets rejected in a top journal. And the second one, the second statistic he would like to highlight here is that if there are 2 referees employed in a journal, which is the normal case, when you send a paper to a top journal, normally there'll be at least 2 referees. And in some journals, like, if you send it to American Economic Review, they'll have 3 referees, not 2, they'll have 3. And in majority of the journals, if there is a opposing views by both the referees, then I think they'll try to appoint a 3rd referee, or the editor himself or herself will take a call whether to take it forward or not. So if a journal employs 2 referees, typically the statistic here is that the favorable recommendation that both of them agree on the same page is only 11%. That's 1/9. So in other words, a majority of the cases, 90% of the cases, both of the referees do not agree on a given paper. That again says that most of the decisions made by journals are very subjective. So it's not really objective, it is very subjective. So again, you should not get disheartened if the paper gets rejected in a top journal, because as you can see, the ground fact as per an editor of a top journal is that only 11% of the both referees would agree that they have exactly the same view on a given paper. So most of the times they'll have a conflicting view on a given paper that highlights that most of the times you have a fair chance to submit that paper elsewhere, so you don't have to get disheartened. So that's the second statistic you need to keep in mind. And the third one is there is nothing like luck. And I think a lot of people believe that getting a paper in the top journal sometimes has got to do with your luck. But the editor here is very clear that I think luck doesn't play any important role in publishing in the top journals. So what really works is your painstaking work coupled with the careful risk taking is required for success. So you should know what kind of risk you have to take, and you have to really work hard. I think that pays rather leaving it to your luck. So these three are very important things to understand before we start our discussion today. So the bottom line here is that publishing in the top journal is very difficult, right? So less than 10%. Then most of the times the decisions made by the journal editors or referees is highly subjective, right? So that gives a hope for us to revise or send that paper to elsewhere. So that's important for us to understand. Now, and why the acceptance rate is very low in these journals? Why top journals acceptance rates are very low? One obvious reason is I think most of the researchers may not have enough experience. So that can be fixed over time. So most of the times when we submit to the top journals, especially if we are submitting for the first time, I think it's very easy for the referee or the editor to figure out your level of experience in writing a paper or articulating your idea. So I think they can easily figure out, and I think most of the times you may not get accepted purely because that shows your lack of experience. Your paper is not well polished. So that's what one reason for low acceptance rate. The second one is that so one way of looking at that is if that's the case, you have to keep writing more papers, and you have to keep submitting more papers. The more papers you write, the more experience you gain. So volume increases your probability, right? So you become more prolific, and I think I have a lot of friends and co-authors who would be working on multiple papers at a given point of time. I have one particular co-author, he gets at least one paper accepted every month. I wonder how he gets accepted one paper every month. But his trick is he'll be working on at least 50 papers simultaneously, right? So that increases his probability of getting accepted. And he'll be having a network of co-authors who would be the best authors in those areas. So that all increases his probability of getting published, right? So so once your paper is rejected, for example, it's very important that you have to identify the cause and you have to act accordingly. So there is a possibility that sometimes your papers get rejected because you send the paper from a not well-known school. Like, for example, if a paper goes from India to one of the top American journals, editors will have a bit of a skepticism in terms of your credibility as an author. But I think that may not really drive the decision-making process, but that might lead to some kind of a bias. So that's a possibility. So that you need to look at that. Is that the cause simply because the journal editors are a bit biased, or is it because the paper itself is poor? So you should know exactly what is driving the decision. But you can't really avoid or you can't really eliminate the biases. Somehow you have to get over it, and this normally goes once you start publishing more often, right? So one strategy the editor here says is that Quan Chai says is that ideally when you are working on research, it's a good idea to diversify your portfolio. Right. So in a top journal, the normal acceptance decision from the day of submission takes around 3 years. Sometimes it can be quick, but the average is around 3 years. So that's a very long time. So you can't write one paper and then keep waiting until the paper gets accepted. The rejection happens relatively faster. It takes about 6 to 8 months. Even that's a bit longer. So it's a good idea to diversify that kind of a risk. So if you're working on many papers in related areas, but not exactly the same area, or even unrelated areas through multidisciplinary research, there is a higher possibility that one of the other papers would get accepted. So it's a good idea to diversify your research portfolio, right? So it's very important, I think, especially in the first few years of your career. So where your publications are counted more, especially in a system where there is a tenure track process, it becomes very, very complicated. So it's a good idea to work on many papers and multiple papers. Right? So you try to diversify as much as possible. Yeah. So if at all, when you diversify, if one of the paper gets a solid hit, in other words, let's assume that that paper gets accepted without much big revision, then it means that that happens to be your strength. Then I think you have to increase your effort in that area. You have to gain more expertise in that area. Right. So that's very important. And you have to narrow down, in few areas. But do not risk yourself by being very narrow at the beginning, right? So, and you keep continuing writing papers as diversified as possible until you identify your expertise over time. So, and Quan says that it's a good idea to concentrate on one or two fields. It doesn't have to be exactly one field. I would suggest, I think you should have at least two fields to focus on when you start your career, right? So just one is too risky. That's one thing, and I'm not going through each and every one. I'm just trying to highlight things that are important. So if the acceptance rate of a top ranking journal is 15%, one needs about 7 papers under review at all times. That's a very interesting statistic, right? So in other words, normally the acceptance rate in top journals is less than 15%. So which means that you should have more than 7 papers under review at a given point of time to have at least one paper gets accepted. So you should have multiple papers all the time working towards publication. So which sometimes we'll talk about, a collaboration a bit later, which sometimes may not be possible by one solo author, I think, but I think you should have a strategy whereby you work on multiple papers at the beginning. So if your goal is to get 10 papers accepted in 5 years of your career, you need about 12 papers under review at all times. So at any given point of time, you'd have at least 12 papers under review over a period of 5 years. So whenever I see and talk to you, you should have at least a dozen papers under review. If the objective is to get at least 10 papers in 5 years' time. Right. So if half dozen papers should be under review at all times for untenured authors. So tenure track authors, they should have more number of papers under review. So that's a nice statistic again. Yeah. So the other tips are, sending all papers to top journals could be risky. So if you keep on getting rejections, that will dishearten you. So it's a good idea to know journal rankings. So there are many methods, many agencies, like, if you're researchers in management area, the top journals are called as FT50 journals. FT50 stands for Financial Times Top 50 Journals in the world. So that includes all management areas. Your screen is still visible. Someone is sharing. Any issues with my screen?
No, sir. No, sir. We can able to see, sir.
Okay, great. So, FT50 is the list of the top 50 journals in all areas of management. So, if you pick all areas of management, there might be at least 10,000 journals. So, out of the 10,000 journals, we're talking about just 50 journals, which are the top 50, right? So, that's the top layer, the cream of the cream layer in management studies. It can be in finance, it can be in economics, entrepreneurship, accounting, marketing, operations, etc. So below that, the next set of ranking, it's called as ABDC ranking, stands for Australian Business Deeds Council ranking, which is a popular ranking device. So if you look at that one, so there are they have different types of ranking. So the top cream layer journals are called as A-star journals. In management studies, there might be not less than around 60 or 70 in this case, or even close to 100 A-star journals. Then below that, you have A journals, then you have B journals, then you have C journals, and the last C is I think the least you can get in this ranking method. So then you have general journals which are not part of any ranking process, but I think which are peer reviewed. I think these journals called as Scopus Index journals. So I would suggest, I think if you're starting your research career, you should always aim to publish at least in A-star journals. So your aim should be to publish in A-star journals, but I think as a risk mitigating strategy, you can aim for some A journals too, but don't go below A while writing papers. Right. So quantity is also important. The quality is definitely the most important thing. Sometimes I think quantity tells that you can do research. So when you write your papers, I think we'll discuss more about writing, but I think, it's important that when you write your papers, it has to be as clear as possible. It has to be as clear for any naive reader to understand what you have written. There should not be any assumptions, and I think, you should not bury your main things in very long paragraphs. Right, so we'll discuss on writing a bit later, but I think clarity is something what the editors will try to look. And I think it's very, very important for you not to commit any. And I can share from my own experience. I had a paper under review in a A-star journal, and I got a revised resubmit, and it was a very mild revised resubmit. In other words, the comments were not really that harsh. So I felt very happy that if I send a revised version back to the journal, because it was very easy to address all those comments, it will accept for sure. It will get accepted in the journal for sure. But I think, when I sent the paper back, it got rejected. And the comment made by the editor really I felt very sorry to see the kind of a silly mistake I committed. In the abstract of that article, there was a spelling mistake. Instead of RISE rice, I wrote RAISE rice. So the editor was not happy with my sloppy and casual approach with the spellings, right? And he rejected the paper purely because of my my carelessness. Right, so I lost a huge opportunity and learned a very big lesson at the same time. So it's very critical that your abstract and your introduction should not have even one mistake, right? So when you write a paper, you spend most of the time writing your introduction section and your abstract section. So try not to commit any mistake, a symbol, a spelling mistake that can frustrate the referees or the editor. Right. I think I have a live example here. So it's very important to have more clarity. I'll discuss more on the clarity a bit later. And I think it's very important to clearly state what the contribution of the paper is relative to the literature. So within the context of the literature. So it's very important that before you send the paper to a journal, you try to present the paper at as many venues as possible for many reasons. One is, I think, unless you present the paper somewhere, you can't really pull all your thoughts in a nice way, in a nice flow. You write a paper, you read a paper. For your mind, you think you've done a good job. But when you make a presentation slides, then I think you are trying to communicate what you have to some other people. And I think there you need to write in such a way that they understand. I think, when you submit a paper to a journal, that's the most important thing. That the editor, when the editor looks at the paper, the objective of the editor is whether the readers of the journal really understand your paper. So it's not you understanding the paper, but the readers, can they understand the paper? So it's very important that you present your paper as many times as possible for that reason. The second reason is you should present the paper in as many good conferences as possible, because most of your potential referees would be your discussants or people attending your sessions in the conference. So when they raise questions, and if you address those questions and then submit the paper, I think you have a higher likelihood of getting accepted. So ensure that you try to present the paper as many times and try to get the valuable feedback and try to incorporate that into the paper. So you have to, in other words, I think you have to make people familiar with your work, right? So, to start with, you can start presenting in your own departments or schools. Then you start presenting outside in the conferences. Yeah, so this is a very interesting and I think important tip as per the editor and the author of these slides, right? So it's a good idea to know at least 100 people active in your field. So there is no harm in communicating to the top researchers in your field. And trying to build up this network is crucial. Some people say that people who are in the top universities, they have their own club. And for them, it's very easy to get their papers published. I don't think that is the reason. The reason is that they are in the part, they're part of a big network. And they try to share their work with all the people who could be their potential referees. So it's important that you know that club. And I think you become part of the club by writing to them and trying be active in the club. So you prepare a list of 100 active people in your main area of research and try to meet them. So you can as well meet them through communicating through your emails. You can have, once they get to know your papers, and if you have more familiarity with them, you can even ask them to come on Skype or Zoom or Google to where you can present your work. So it's a good idea to do that job. I think knowing people and becoming part of that network is crucial for publications. Okay. Yeah, this is a crucial thing for a research student at the student level stages. I think, yeah, definitely your supervisor can be one of your co-authors to start with, but I think you should also try and get access to as many leading researchers in your areas to become your co-authors. I think, a lot of experienced researchers really like bright and young researchers who are doing PhD, because I think, they'll have all the energy and drive to run and get things done, to execute the ideas of experienced people. It's always a good combination to have a very experienced researcher when you are a very early stage career researcher. Now, I can share my own experience. when I was a student doing my PhD, while making a presentation, I met my first co-author. So my first co-author was there as part of that conference, and he was a top researcher, one of the world leading researchers in my area, and he was a professor at New York University. He worked with Nobel Prize winning authors, and he's a leading figure in that area. Then he once the presentation is over, I have taken efforts meeting him after the presentation and trying to keep in touch with him until I was able to persuade that I can join with him as a co-author. Then I think he really liked my passion and my interest, my inquisitiveness in that area of research, and he really helped me to get my first top journal publication. So it's very important you do that when you're a student, right? So you try to team up with a co-author who happens to be a very experienced researcher, right? So you can work with your advisor, but I think you still have to find many other people to work with. So that's very important. So going alone is a very risky strategy. So you need seasoned co-authors, and the probability of acceptance as per Quan Choi is it just doubles to have a seasoned co-author. Right. So it's a good idea. The other thing what Quan Choi says is that I think when you start working on a research paper, it doesn't have to be a groundbreaking idea, right? So ideally, you should not work on a ground. In fact, as per Quan Choi, ideally you should not work on a groundbreaking idea while you are a young researcher. So it's a good idea to work on an established idea and see how well you can contribute to that literature by doing some extending the existing body of knowledge, right? So I think that's like a learning curve that helps you to learn how to understand literature, how to understand a contribution, how to extend or find a gap, and how to extend that gap. So you can hold on to your groundbreaking ideas a bit later. I think in fact some of Nobel laureates also told the same thing for their students. Sorry, I'm not going through each and everything what he said in the interest of time. Right? It's a very important that when you send a paper to a journal, you should always write a cover letter. Right? So don't take it easy. Writing a cover letter is crucial. I think it's always optional when you submit your paper to your top journal whether to submit a cover letter or not. But make sure that you write a cover letter explaining how your particular paper adds to the existing body of knowledge. And yeah, so this is something what I learned. When you write a paper, I normally write a paper in the following way. I write the result section first. Then once I write the result section, then I write the methodology section. Once I write the methodology section, where I also write the hypothesis section and literature section following that. Then once I am done with all that, only then I touch my introduction section. So I always keep my introduction section towards the end. It's very, very crucial you do that because, see, result section is the easiest section you can write because you don't have to, articulate your ideas there. In a result section, you basically write what you got. So it's relatively straightforward to write. Likewise, the methodology section is straightforward to write. Right. So once you have done this, then you write your hypothesis section, your literature review section, and try to connect both. Then once you're done with this section, I think then you write the master print in your introduction. And I think, as rightly pointed out by Quan Choi, devote half of the writing time just for introduction and conclusion. See how important, how much weightage they carry, right? So you have to spend maximum time on your introduction section and your conclusion section. So that because when you send a paper, the most read section by a referee is your introduction section. So the referee makes it a point to reach each and every word of the introduction section, right? So you have to spend more time, and you have to revise. Normally, I think when you look at a top journal like AMJ, that's Academy of Management journal, the editors of the journal suggest that when they interviewed the best awardees in terms of best paper awardees in the journal over 10 years, all of them told exactly the same thing. They reread and rewrite their introduction section at least 10 times, right? So that's a crucial thing. I think do not take it easy, right? So you have to somehow ensure that the readers are attracted to your paper as soon as they read your introduction section. Right? So you have to get their attention early at the beginning itself. I think, ideally your introduction section should not be very long. It has to be relatively short. Right? So you have to, right at the beginning itself, you have to motivate the reader why this is a very interesting thing, why you have to read my study. Right? So you have to keep the reader motivated to read and try to read the whole paper. Yeah. So and the referees will take mental decision on the paper within 15 minutes of reading the paper. You look at that. The human retention time in terms of following a continuous thought process is not more than 20 minutes. So their best retention time is the first 20 minutes. Right. So in this case, Quan Chai is saying that within 15 minutes of reading the paper, the referee can make up their mind whether they have to accept or reject the paper. If they don't like the paper, I think it's very difficult for them to accept that, or send for a revised resubmit, and it clearly justifies why they're rejecting the paper. Right, so you have to make sure that they do not lose interest of your paper. Yeah, when you write conclusions, I think make sure that you do not repeat what is there in the introduction section. I think you talk mainly on the implications of what you have. A typical introduction section should be a 2-page or 1/6 of the paper. So if you write more than 2 pages, I think it becomes very difficult for because 2 pages is something like 15 minutes of the referee time. So their main retention is that time, the first 15 minutes of reading. So if you let them keep on reading, I think they can't retain the whole thing, and there is a higher likelihood that they may reject the paper. It's always good to give some kind of an analogy or anecdote or try to relate your work with the real world. So to give an example and try to relate it with the real world, with the real numbers, and simplify your paper to something that the editor, the reader can get a feel, they can touch. So it's very important that when you write a paper, you give a real world citation, statistic, anecdote, or examples. So that really motivates. So I try to ensure whenever I write a paper, I try to ensure that I can simplify the whole idea I have in the paper with a simple example that the referee or the reader can relate to from the real world. Yeah. I'll try to make sure that the whole thing can be told in one sentence, connecting the paper to the real world, and where they can easily, envisage or get a vision of what exactly I have in mind. Right. So it's important to give this kind of real world examples. Yeah, I think when you start writing papers, it's a good idea to imitate skillful writers. So I think that's the reason why you have to read as many papers as possible in the top journals. There are some prolific authors, especially if you're, in economics, for example. I really like the style of Stephen Levitt, the way he writes papers. Likewise, I think, in finance, Raghuram Rajan writes in a beautiful way. Right. So it's a good idea to know who are your favorite authors. And I think along with them, not only just knowing them, you have to read the papers and then try to understand their style. And there is no harm imitating their ideas. And I think it's very important that you should not plagiarize anything when you write or do research. That sends a very wrong signal, not only for the current papers and also your future chance of publications. Yeah, there is all. I think this is not an important point to discuss anyway. Yeah. So before you start writing the paper, it's a good idea to get a sketch. Like, and I have a co-author who was the editor of one of the top journals in management called a Strategic Management Journal. She always makes a point before she starts writing the paper. Once we got our ideas right, once we have some data, and once we have tested our ideas, she'll prepare a presentation to me. And I think we both sit and go through the presentation and try to iron out all the issues and get our thoughts very clear, and then we start writing the paper. So sketching what you want to write, the content in each section is very important. I think it's a good idea to sketch briefly the content of each section before you actually write your paper. So that will iron out all the issues. It's like a rough blueprint. I think for my this particular co-author, making a PowerPoint slide presentation to me is like a blueprint for her before we start writing the paper. So that way, I think not lose direction, right? So, and you not get into minor things, and you focus mainly on the major things that you need to focus on. Right. So yeah. So this is again depends on the journal how big the paper should be. Should not be really big. Excluding all your tables, references, all those things. I think the real weight of the paper should be in 15 pages. Right. So you should be able to tell your story, the whole story, in 15 pages, ideally. So this is another important thing. When before you write your paper, do not think too much. Right. So do not write too much, because when you start writing the paper, your thoughts naturally will evolve, and a lot of new thoughts come as part of the writing process. Okay. So we're not discussing about theory papers. I think most of you may not be working on theories. Yeah, it's important that you know how to create paragraphs, and almost all paragraphs should be self-content, in the sense that they're independent in a way on their own, right? So even if I read that paragraph, I should be able to understand something which is the gist of that paragraph. I don't have to depend on another paragraph to understand this paragraph. So you have to ensure that each paragraph is a self content, or but not fully independent, but I think relatively independent in terms of understanding. And I think a page should not have a lot of big paragraphs. You can have at least 2 paragraphs. Ideally, should have around 4 paragraphs in my book. Now coming to conclusion. So a paper needs a good concluding remark, right? So I must say that most of the referees, when they read the paper first, or when, see, it's like this. When you send the paper, editor reads the abstract and decides who should be the associate editor of the journal, or the who referees should be. Then I think accordingly, the editor assigns an associate editor or referees to the paper. And when the referees look into the paper, they mainly look at introduction and conclusion first before they go into the paper. And most of the times, the decision is already made once they read the introduction and conclusion section. So these two sections are critical for the paper. So you have to discuss. You don't have to be negative. It's not a good idea to use negative words in the paper. But you still have to discuss honestly what are the limitations of the paper, and how you are able to extend the body of knowledge through the paper. Then how this paper is connected to other papers in the literature, and how your results are compared to other results in the literature. And if they're not comparable, then how the paper is related to the whole literature in general. Right. So, and you do not make sure you do not repeat what is there in the introduction in the conclusion section. Sometimes the conclusion section will also have, some journals really want you to give a discussion section where you have to talk about the empirical aspects of it to the real world in terms of what the policy implications of this research. So in that case, you have to clearly explain the economic significance of your work, and how this work is related to the real world. So, and what's the bottom line of your research in terms of in terms of real world implications. Should have clarity on that. Yeah. See, abstract is for me the most important thing. The of a maximum 100 to 150 words, right? So, and I think if the referee is not convinced with your abstract, which just takes 15 seconds, the paper is gone. So do an excellent job when you write your abstract. Be as clear as possible. And even the title should be, it can tell how good an author is, right? So it has to be, I always, my style is to put a questioning title so that I feel that the readers would like to know the answer. So these are not important, references and all those things. So I will stop it here because I think we might be running out of time if I continue like this. May I take any questions from some of you in terms of...
Vijay sir.
Yeah, Upender.
You can take, sir. Half an hour is there, sir.
Okay. So
take up to 5:30, sir, then followed by questions and answers.
No, I thought the session closes at 5.
No, sir. 5:30, sir. Up to 4.
5:30. Okay. So we are closing at 5:30. So we'll take the second half after 5 o'clock. We can take question and answer. So in a nutshell, I think Chai is trying to tell us, if I want to summarize what we discussed right now, so he's saying that you do not get disheartened if the paper gets rejected. Ideally, you diversify your research portfolio, and I think it's a good idea to have co-authors at a very early stage of your career, and try to build up that network over time. That's very critical for you, and make sure that you articulate your ideas as clear as possible, and make sure that you do not commit any silly mistakes. Spend a lot of time on introduction section and the abstract section of the paper, and make sure your conclusion is independent and also add something more than introduction to the paper. So these things, and I think again, when you write a paper, you follow a strategy, if you have a set of co-authors, let's assume you have co-authors and you're a less experienced author, then I think ideally you should take the job of writing the results and methodology. Experienced author should write the introduction section and conclusion section of the paper. So that's where the whole storytelling happens, and that's where the maximum weightage for the decision would be. So these are some tips for you to publish in top journals. So apart from this, in terms of selecting a top journal, so which journal is the right journal for your paper, right? So you may not notice this, but think editors of journals are very, very careful in checking whether the paper, just by looking at the abstract, they can figure out whether the paper aims are in line with the aims and scope of the journal. So before you submit your paper to a journal, make sure that your paper falls into the aims and scope of the journal. So read the aims and scope of the journal. And when you write your cover letter, make it a point writing to the editor that the rationale for submitting your paper to the journal is mainly because your paper falls into the aims and scope of the journal. So please read aims and scope of the journal before you submit to the journal. Right. So then I think the editor he thinks the author is very serious about that particular journal. And I think when you are targeting a journal, the other thing what I strongly recommend is try to find journals that are emerging. Right. So there'll be some journals which may be A-star journals, but they are still emerging journals, not right at the top. See, normally the emerging journals would be field journals. So you have core journals and field journals. Like, for example, if you take economics, American Economic Review is a general journal of economics, whereas developmental economics, which is also an A-star journal, which is a field journal. So it's people who work in development economics, they try to publish in the journal. So it's a good idea when you start publishing, you start with field journals rather going for the general core journals. Because I think they appreciate early career researchers work more compared to the core journals where they look for huge contribution to the field.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Right. So
Vijay sir,
yeah,
you can take questions.
Yeah.
Sir. Many are posting questions. You can take questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll take questions. Let me stop sharing the screen 1 second.
Thank you.
I stopped sharing the screen. Now I need to go back to this place. I'm assuming that questions will be. Oh, I've got a lot of.
Chat box.
Yeah, I'll share the presentation through Upender. I think Upender would send the presentation to you all. Okay, I think the main question is about sharing the presentation. Okay. I'll send the, I think, can you ask some questions? You can come online. Some of you can ask some questions or share your experience or.
So good evening, sir. I have one question.
Yeah, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is Aziz, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Aziz. Yeah, no. I think I'll take Aziz. Let's listen to Aziz. Yeah.
Sir, can I publish in journals without PhD?
Of course you can. There are many top researchers who have published their articles even before getting a PhD. One classic example is, Subramania, what's his name? He's one of the ministers in BJP government. Subramania Swamy. Do you know Subramania Swamy, the Indian BJP minister or MP? He was a master student when he published a paper in Econometrica, and that led him to get admission at MIT for PhD. So there are many people who have published their papers while doing masters too in the top journals. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
My name is Ajay. My name is Ajay Kumar, sir.
Yes, Ajay.
Ajay Kumar, faculty from Vicar College of Commerce, Hyderabad.
Okay.
Sir, my query is with referencing part. See, most
Right.
of our work cited, that means most of the works we have cited a list of sources which we have been referred. So that should be in the text
Yeah.
itself, you need to cite it, or else at the foot of the thesis we need to cite it. That is the first question I have, sir. And the second question is,
Right.
what are the norms and rules of edit bibliography from particular sources of index?
Right.
So please write on these two queries, sir.
Right. Right. So, so to answer your first question, Ajay, each journal will have their own style. So when you submit a paper, before submitting, you have to read author guidelines, where the journal clearly mentions whether the paper should be within the text or it should be at the end. Generally, most of the journals would have their references to be at the end, not within the text as a footnote. But I think you should refer to the journal style manual or author's guidelines to make sure how they want it to be. And the second point you made, I know I forgot what exactly you said. The second one.
What are the norms for editing of bibliography of the sources of index?
What are the
norms and rules of editing the bibliography of the sources and index?
Yeah, there are no particular norms. A lot of students use software to arrange all that. But I think again, you have to check the editors or the author's guidelines of journals to look at the norms. I think both your questions are related in the sense that it's idiosyncratic to the journal. Each journal has got their own style.
Sir, with your permission, one last question, sir. With regard to generalization and interpretation of data, whether we need to go for the technical language we have to use while generalizing and interpretation of data? Is it mandatory to use the technical language in the research paper or the PhD thesis?
No, I don't know what exactly you mean by technical language, but I think whatever language you use, that language should be something which is legible to any naive or an average reader. In other words, you should not use a lot of complicated terms when you write a paper. It has to be something that is simple to understand by anyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think someone mentioned here, how can we identify clone journals? See, I know that's a problem. We also have this problem of predatory journals, which I think is a big issue right now in most of the cases. I think the easiest way is you stick to one journal ranking method. Like for example, I stick to ABDC journals. I focus only on the A-star journals in ABDC ranked journals. I will not move away from that. Every year I get updated about the ranking. I just blindly follow that. I'll not look into any of the other journals than the list that is there in the ABDC. That's how I would like to answer that question. I'm happy to take more questions. Yeah, feel free to ask.
Sir, here some questions are mentioned in the chat box. So
yes,
please. Of them, can I ask that questions?
Please ask.
Okay. There is a question from Ola Junko. If no response from a journal concentrating your paper after a long time, can you withdraw the paper and send to another journal?
Yeah, of course, you can do that. But I have experience like that with some journals. Recently, I submitted an article to a journal, which is a A-star journal. I submitted this article on the 9th of April. And I did not hear anything from the editor until now. Then when I looked at the journal site, it says that decision is pending. And I saw this decision pending for the last 2 months. I think, it's unusual that the editor takes 2 months to decide whether to accept or reject a paper once the editor receives the referee's comments. So then what I did is I wrote a personal mail to the journal's editor, who happens to be one of the top professors in that area. Then within minutes, I got a reply from that professor apologizing for the delay in sending or taking a decision on that, because she is going through a lot of issues due to the COVID situation, both personally and also at work. So then she guaranteed that I will get a response within 2 weeks. Right. So the first thing what you can do is it's a good idea to write to the journal editor, seeking clarification on why the paper is not, why you did not hear anything from the journal, because a typical correspondence would happen on average in the top journals within 2.5 months. If it is getting delayed by anything more than 4 months, you have every right to write to the journal editor seeking clarification.
Okay, sir. I think that question is answered. Another question is, how can we identify cloned journals?
Sorry?
How can we identify cloned journals?
Yeah, I think I addressed that comment. I answered that comment.
Yeah, next question, madam. Next
Okay,
question.
sir. I think they didn't get the answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
somebody asked some question.
Okay.
Yeah, I think someone here, I think Muhammad has a question. Let's take the live question of Muhammad.
Okay, sir. Sure.
Sir, where can I find journals to publish?
It depends on your area, Muhammad. I think, what is your area?
Sir, it's Telangana Karimnagar.
No, your research area.
Research area. Domain.
Yeah, your domain, yes.
Finance, finance or marketing, like that. Sir. Yes.
I think
Hello, Muhammad.
he's facing some network problems, sir. Shall I go
Okay.
for another question, sir?
So
Yeah, I
HR
think I'll just answer that question in any case. I think if you're in management area, I think you please follow ABDC rank journals. So just Google for ABDC rank journal. You'll get the ranking in an Excel sheet. You download that. Next question.
okay.
Gopi, sir, you can carry on.
No, I answered the question. Can you please ask me the
Dr. Gopi, sir, you can
yeah.
answer the question, sir.
My
You have a
question is
question?
You can ask your question, sir.
okay. My question is clear.
It's clear.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
After the question clear.
Okay, sir. There is another question. Prabhakar Nandru. Professor, if I send my research paper to top journals, if my paper go through any revision, then when I send paper to editor after corrections, then second time editor will send paper to the same reviewers or different reviews.
Right.
What rule generally editor will follow?
Yeah, I think it depends on editor's choice, but I think technically speaking, the editor has to send it back to the same referee. But it happened to me in one case. The editor sent it to a different referee. Eventually, the paper got rejected because the fault is not with the editor. Fault is with me. The reason is I took about 1 year for revision. So if you take a long time for revision, it's very difficult for the editor to find that referee, and it's very difficult for the referee to have motivation to look at your revision. Then the editor has to find a new referee. So ideally, if you can resubmit your revised version in a maximum 2 months, then I think there is a higher likelihood that the editor might send to the same referee.
Okay, sir. I think they get their answer. Then, and moving on to the next question. Is it appropriate to keep research paper title a study of or a study on?
No, I think starting should never be a study. Maybe it can be a study at the end. Like, for example, ideally a title should be something that is much more eye-catching, in the sense that the reader can really show a lot of interest to know more about it. If you say a study, you see that doesn't really motivate anyone. Like, for example, you can first say what exactly is the paper about. Then you can see a study, but you don't start with a study as the beginning of the title.
Okay, sir. There is another question from Ganesh Kumar Rai. What is the difference between the UGC centralized and remaining journals available in web in terms of the value of APA score?
Yeah, I think I can't answer the question because I don't follow that list. I follow ABDC rank journal, FT 50 rank journals. EBSCO, there is every chance that some of the EBSCO journals are, but please don't quote me on this, but there is every chance that EBSCO journals or even Scopus Index journals can be predatory journals. So you have to be much more careful in terms of selecting your journals.
Okay, sir. There is another question. How is self-plagiarism is allowed?
Sorry?
How much self-plagiarism is allowed?
Plagiarism, sir. Yes, plagiarism, sir.
Oh, plagiarism. Plagiarism, it varies. I don't think there is a hard and fast rule on this because sometimes when you're referring to other people's paper and then talking about them, it becomes, for the software, it looks as if you're plagiarizing. But I think, I don't know, there is a cutoff point, anything like that. But I think you be aware that you're not plagiarizing anyone's work. I think that's more important.
Okay.
So your conviction is more important.
Okay, sir. The next question is from Nehru. How to approach top researcher in our area to start work with him or her? Area is labor economics.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I think if your area is labor economics, you have to identify who are the top labor economists in the world. In other words, who are publishing in the top 5 journals in your area. For example, there is Journal of Labor Economics, American Economic Review, Quarterly Journal of Economics, Review of Economic Studies, Econometrica, right? So these are the top journals that publish papers in labor economics, right? So see the main authors who are published in this area. Try to know more about them. Look at their research. Try to read their papers. Try to understand what they're doing. Then see who among them is closest to what you're doing. Then try to motivate them. Now, when you talk to an established researcher for the first time, it's very important that you try to spur interest in them by showing something, showcasing something. So unless you have done something, you have something concrete with you, do not approach any co-author. So if you write a co-author saying that, can we both join together and do some work, no one will be interested. Rather, you write to a co-author saying that I have done work and this is what I have. If this is of any interest to you, I'd like to know more by working with you. Can you join with me and collaborate? I think that's much more better approach than right at the beginning writing a mail to them saying that I want to co-author with you. No one will respond to your mail.
Okay, sir. The next question is, sir, I have done my research on local health and development issues in my area. When I sent it to good journals that focus on rural or development issues, I am told that the research area, sample or study area is too narrow to be interest to global audience. How do I address this issue?
Yeah, so I think, I think, I don't know your paper in depth, so to answer that question, but I think if you're getting a comment saying that it is too narrow, there are a lot of narrow journals also. I think, there are many journals. It's a good idea to know which are all the journals which have even narrow approaches, which are, specific field journals. So don't get disheartened. I think, a rejection in one journal doesn't mean that your paper is bad. You can try sending the paper to other journals, which are more specialized journals. Right. So, but if you get 4 rejections with the same reason, then you have to think that something is wrong with the paper. Until then, you don't conclude.
Okay, sir. The next question is, does H-index score or number of citations obtained will impact on interview point of view?
Of course. Yeah, they have a huge impact. And it's going to become much bigger in India and elsewhere right now. H-index, see, earlier people used to look at journal citation. Now people are looking at individual rankings or individual citations, which is H-index, and that will have a huge impact in the interviews.
The next question is, peer-reviewed journals published within short time than care journals. Why, sir?
I don't know. I think there is nothing like that. I don't think that might be your experience. But I think, I suggest don't look into care journals or peer-reviewed journals. Follow some international standard ranking process, and try to target only the top journals.
The next question is how to find a research gap.
How to find a research gap? You have to read a lot of literature, right? So that's a very generic question. So unless you read a lot of literature, you can't find the research gap.
Okay, sir. Someone asked that, sir, in UGC care list, if we don't find journal to publish article relating to our topic, then which journal should we prefer? Can you suggest some law journal for publication?
Law journal, is it?
Yes, sir.
There are hundreds of law journals. Please look at ABDC ranking. ABDC ranking list. There are plenty of hundreds of law journals listed there.
Okay, sir. Sir, another question, whether sending article to an e-journal for publication can be count as a published work?
I don't know what exactly you mean by e-journal. Nowadays, all journals are e-journals. Journals are electronic now. So if you're talking about open access journal, some open access journals have recognition, but majority of them do not have recognition right now. But I think, I don't know what your version of e-journals, but all journals are e-journals.
Okay, the next question is, how can we know which journal is fake and which is not?
Yeah, so again, go with reputed ranking, journal ranking agencies, like as I told you, ABDC ranking. So there is nothing fake in that, because people have already checked, researched, and they came out with that list.
Do we need to paraphrase tables for use of secondary data?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a
sir.
good, but again, you check the journal author guidelines. Yeah.
The next question is, how to get maximum citations?
Well, see, that depends on the topic you're working on. Let's assume you're working on a topic that is very, very relevant to the world. Like, for example, right now, if you're working on COVID, a lot of people will refer to your work because your work will be one of the first works, right? So citations to a large extent depends on applicability of your work to other researchers and other areas. So your topic itself determines your citations. Like, for example, if you're working on SDG goals, sustainability development goals, like, you're working on poverty or energy or on all these areas, climate change, you get more citations because more people refer to your work.
Okay, sir. I think the answer is get by him who asked the question. There is another question from Hussaini. We must we always merge introduction and background in journal papers?
Sorry, always?
Must we always merge introduction and background in journal papers?
No, we do not. Right, so we do not merge introduction and background. Introduction is independent on its own. Background comes after introduction.
Yes, madam.
Sir, good evening, sir. This is Amudha Nandini from PK Arts College for Women, Gobi.
Yes, please.
Sir, my area of interest is finance, sir. So in this COVID-19 period, all the financial performance of different companies are not in a better way.
Right.
May I take those data for my further research, sir?
See, it all depends what is the research question you have in mind. So your data and everything is determined by the question you're trying to answer. So first thing is that you have to spend and try to understand what is the relevant question to ask in this context. And for that, you need to read the literature and see whether COVID gives a better answer to the existing question.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Madam, any questions?
I request all the participants, if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask, sir. Ask, sir.
There are no questions. You can go for the vote of thanks.
Okay.
Well,
Okay,
thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. It is very informative. Now it's time to propose vote of thanks. On behalf of Mother Teresa College of Engineering and Technology, I would like to take the opportunity to vote of thanks who have directly and indirectly contributed to this webinar on how to target right journals in social sciences, organized by our institute. Before concluding the session, I request all the participants to fill and submit the feedback form, which we are sharing in Google Meet chat box and YouTube Live only. Please don't use all capital letters while filling the feedback. Make sure that you enter the correct details, and the feedback form will be live for only 1 hour. The participants who will submit the feedback form only will get the certificate in first come first serve manner. I feel fortunate to be a part of this webinar. Thank you everyone. Have a pleasant day. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Panda.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, Unara. Vijay, sir.
Maybe, sir, later and Kunta, sir.
Okay, madam. Participants, you can fill your feedback form. You can leave the meeting. Thank you all. Sir, welfare.
The feedback form is shared in the chat box. Please go through it. This will be active for only 1 hour.
Madam.
Yes, sir.
Proper unna camera దగ్గర అది స్నాప్‌షాట్ తీస్తున్నాము.
Okay, sir.
ఒక్క నిమిషం. రైట్ ప్రాపర్ గా ఉండండి. రైట్. బ్లర్ వస్తుంది.
Okay, na, sir?
Okay, madam, fine.
Okay, sir.
Participants, you can leave the session. Okay, madam, thank you very much, madam.
No problem, sir. My pleasure.
Okay. You can leave the meeting.
Okay.
Madam, feedback, please.
We already sent, sir. You can fill that.
Where, sir? It is not there in the chat box.
Wait. Again, it's there. 5 times we.
You can have it. Just what you can do is you open multiple files. You can open multiple files.
Just now I sent.
Multiple files. What you can do is say for
It's not there, sir.
It came, sir, 5:23 p.m. Just now I shared.
It goes like this.
It is visible. It is there.
You can actually pull a corner, or you can go with the file.
Yeah, now it is there.
Whatever files you like to have it.
Is there? See, sir.
It's there. We can fill. Who filled the feedback form? You can leave the meeting.